Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening and good morning, wherever you are in the world listening to us. My name is Marcelo Gleiser. I am the director of the Institute for Cross-Disciplinary Engagement at Dartmouth College in the USA, in New Hampshire. And I have the honor to be hosting this event, which promises to be quite a meaningful conversation about the future of society, or how different people from different parts of the world and of the US think about what it is that we need to do in order to make the world a more just and equitable place for us all to live. And so I am going to very briefly mention who our panelists are. We have Her Excellency Joyce Banda, who was president of Malawi from 2012 to 2014. And she's also the president of the Joyce Banda Foundation, one of the most influential women in the world at this moment. We have Pastor Barry Randolph from the Church of the Messiah in Detroit, who was Michiganian of the Year in 2019, who does a spectacular work in grassroots community building. And we're also going to have Everard Findlay, who is a dear friend and also a member of our advisory board of ICE at Dartmouth. And it is really Everard that is going to be the master of ceremonies and the interlocutor for tonight. I'm actually going to be speaking a little bit on the perspectives from a scientific way of thinking on where we are right now and where we could possibly be going, at least under my point of view. So without much further ado, what I want to do is what I always do in these public dialogues that we host, which is to show a brief video that explains what we do with this institute and what our mission is. And hopefully, will inspire people to continue this work that is so important, which is to bring conversations across the disciplines in the academia and, of course, outside academia as well. Okay, so let's watch the video and then we'll continue.
The world is a complex place, a network of flowing information and changing patterns, where forces known and unknown generate the most sublime beauty and the most terrifying destruction. The world inspires wonder and doubt, and we humans try to make sense of it all, creating stories, theories, symphonies, and poems. I am Marcelo Gleiser, director of the Institute for Cross-Disciplinary Engagement at Dartmouth, or ICE. On behalf of all of us at ICE and our partners, I invite you to be a part of our institute, to be a part of this very essential conversation. What is the nature of reality? What is the future of humanity? Will machines think? Will and should we become immortal? Is there free will? Are we alone in the universe? Can science be a path towards spirituality? ICE was created to address these issues and establish new bridges between different ways of knowing. Our mission is to overcome old bigotries and facilitate a constructive dialogue between intellectuals and the general public, creating a community of citizens concerned with the common good, engaging experts, promoting public dialogue, and offering open access courses. One thing is certain: the hardest questions ask for different viewpoints, for a cross-disciplinary approach, for intellectual openness. The sciences and the humanities need one another now more than ever, and we need them both.
Thank you so much for watching. So if you want to know more about what we have been doing for the last 4 years that this institute has been alive, please go to ice.dartmouth.edu. Our ICE has nothing to do with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency from the federal government of the US. It's kind of an unfortunate misnomer because we were there first, so to speak. So it's important to remember that. And so I'm very, very happy to introduce my dear friend, Everard Findlay. He is a phenomenal human being. He has done wonders for creating ways in which people can reinvent themselves, can make themselves known. Cities can make themselves known and reinvent themselves, countries as well. And he has been part of the environmental board of New York City. He is a jack of all trades, and it is really his idea to put this panel together. He is the curator. He is the mind behind all of this. And that is why I will uncharacteristically pass the baton to him as he can lead us in this conversation tonight. So Everard, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Hi, Marcelo. I just want to say thank you so much. This is really amazing to be able to be speaking with you. You know, we have spoken over the years about several things, and what you're doing, as you know, has always been an inspiration. Thank you, everyone, for being here and watching. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining, and also Pastor Barry. Today, it's, you know, we live in a society where the challenges that we face are very much the topic on the hearts of everyone. I think for me to be able to speak to three of you pillars, because you all represent a pillar for me, in you, Marcelo, in science, you, Your Excellency, in governance, and Pastor Barry, you in religion or spirituality, as you would look at it. I just wanted to say a few things about each of you from a personal perspective. And Marcelo, I know this is uncharacteristic, but thank you very much for doing this. And thanks to the Institute, I feel honored to be a part of it. Each of you have affected me in so many ways. I think, Your Excellency, starting with you, where I have two daughters, and you have kind of embodied this idea of the divine feminine in governance. You know, you were able to really be someone that took on moving your country in 2 years, moving the GDP into a positive growth pattern, and then tackling corruption all at the same time. You won the award for tackling hunger, and with that award, you then started the Joyce Banda Foundation, where you impacted the lives of 1.3 million people, and you continue to do that all over the world. You're a source of inspiration to a lot of people. Pastor Barry, you with what you do in community in Detroit. Detroit is almost like a microcosm of our challenges. These conversations, Marcelo and I have conversations about a lot when we see each other. You are someone that have been, as Marcelo said, a Michigander of the Year, but the way in which you are the pastor that in church, you tell people to get off your knees, because now is not a time to be on your knees. Now is a time to get things done. You are known as the road pastor and other things which we probably shouldn't say on camera, because you've broken a lot of different rules. You've created this free internet in the neighborhood that you're from. You've gotten 409 kids into college. You have workforce housing or housing for people in your community, over 209 units of housing. I am so honored, and thank you for being here. Marcelo, for you, there's so much I can say. You have so many accolades. I'm sure your viewers are very much so familiar with that. I would just like to say, for me, that you really embody this aspect of how does every individual understand that their connection with the universe and the individual is a direct must for us to understand. And through your work, you've pushed the boundaries of that with the books that you've written, the hundreds of papers that you've written. You truly have been and continue to be an inspiration to me. And thank you so much, three of you. I really want to say, I just would like to sit back and watch you guys talk to each other, because I think for everyone that would be the dream come true. So I would like if each of you, starting with you, Your Excellency, and then Pastor Barry, and then you, Marcelo. If you can kind of talk to us, but please start from your humble beginnings, what led you to be the person that you are, and how do you see this aspect of the future society in each of your prospective fields? And you each have 10 minutes, so please take us on a journey, and please start with how you began, so that we can not just see you as the giants that you are, but for each of us now in the time that we're in, we're really trying to see what does the individual do to connect to the collective. So, Your Excellency, please start with you.
Thank you very much indeed. It's my greatest honor and privilege to be amongst the three distinguished gentlemen in this conversation. I was born in a little village here in Malawi. My father was a policeman in the Malawi police band, and my mother worked in a shop. So in the 50s, that was being born in a high-class family. But I was fortunate that my father wanted to expose me to rural life. The custom in my village was that when you are born in that matrilineal system, your grandmother must bring you up. Because my father insisted on me living in town, they struck a deal that every Friday I would be back home so she can teach me whatever she wanted to teach me in the village. It was while I was in the village that I had a very good friend by the name of Chris. And Chris was going to the village school, and I went to the urban school, came back every Friday. Without fail, Chris would be waiting by the roadside for me, and I would tell her what I had seen in town during the week, and she would tell me what she had experienced in the village while I was away. Chris went to the village school, was brighter than me. She was first position every class. That's how I know. We all went to the end of primary education, and we were selected to the best girls' secondary schools. In those days, you had to be selected. Chris went to one of the best girls' schools because she was bright. She went one term and couldn't go back because her family could not raise the $6 that she required to go back. I was 14 years old when I first woke up to the injustice of this world. At that time, I was only crying for Chris, and I remember going to my father to say, find $6. And my father said, well, my salary is $18. When the three of you go to school, I cannot spare anything for Chris. So Chris dropped out. The tragedy is that Chris is where I left her, even now. I thank God that in my work, when I got to State House, I persuaded Chris, because she was angry for the longest time, to come back and work with me. I told her she could just become a champion just like I am. And we've traveled a lot together. I took her to New York in 2013. She was able to meet even Bill Clinton, Gordon Brown. And she is now heading the village program that I heard. We feed 10,000 children a day. And we sponsor girls to go to secondary school. Chris is the one who heads that village program. The sad bit is that now, many years later, we've got 39 million girls out of school in Africa alone. Globally, we are told it is 130 million. That is unacceptable for me. So we can't talk ourselves as a global village, as making progress, when 130 million girls are being lost every single year globally. 39 million Africa alone. So I made up my mind at that age that I'll grow up and send as many girls as possible to school. So the fact that I've grown up and built schools and sent young men and women to school all the way to university, 6,500 to be exact, is because of Chris. Secondly, I got married at 21. By age 25, I had 3 children, locked up in an abusive marriage. By 1971, 10 years later, I packed my bags and left. At a time when women did not walk out of a marriage. Traditionally, you can persist, you can persevere. It is okay, but it wasn't okay for me. And for the sake of my children, I packed my bags and left. So I learned through that divorce that women end up in abusive situations and they can't pack and leave. Number one, it is the tradition, but secondly, because they can't afford, they are not economically empowered. So I made up my mind at age 31, when I packed my bags, that I would leave to ensure that I help my fellow women, one, be able to walk away from abusive situations, but they can only walk away if they're economically empowered. So I started my business at that age. By 1990, when I was 40 years old, I was one of the women in Malawi that were considered rich. But what I did was to reach out and form an association of women, rural women, a network of business women across the country, informal sector. By 1999, in a survey conducted, supported by USAID, it was found that 73% of the women we had supported had grown out of poverty forever. And 84% of the women that we had supported had earned respect at household level. Because when a woman has income and it contributes to the economic empowerment of the household, the girls in that household will go to school. The house will benefit from better nutrition, and the household will benefit from better health. But also, the family will benefit. The woman will benefit because then she, after earning that respect, she also begins to contribute to decisions at household level, but also making critical decisions about her life. At age 33, after divorce, I got married again. And on the 23rd of January 1984, I went to have my fourth born child and suffered what they call postpartum hemorrhage. At that moment, I didn't know the situation in Malawi, that 1,200 girls were dying giving birth. I truly believe that it's not acceptable that women should die giving life. Why is it that here in Africa, we should die giving life, when in America, when a woman is pregnant, it's a time of joy and expectation? They begin to count the days and they even know the sex of the child. And I made up my mind that if God, you save me and I live through this and I don't die, I shall spend my life fighting for women's maternal health. And I'm glad to say that in my work, and especially when I became president of the Republic of Malawi, we were able to reduce maternal death by 32%. And the African Union gave us an award for that work. The fourth area that I have championed in my life is that of leadership. I believe that men and women must work together. We have our own approach here in Africa. I am advocating for our own type of feminism, where we engage our men, we work together. We don't provoke them and we don't confront them. Because when they turn away, then we stand to lose. We must find our way to the decision-making table. And so, starting with myself and economically empowering others, we were able to begin to stand for elections at the constituency level and ended up in parliament. And then I ended up in parliament in 2004, was the appointed Minister of Women and Children, and then I served as Foreign Minister, Vice President, then President of my country. I have learned during that work that we are living in a global village, that we are all interdependent. And while in the past, we have been made to believe that we are African, we are backward, I have learned the critical lessons during my work, that indeed Africa has done better than most parts of the world. Africa, 1995, we went to Beijing, along with other continents. And there we came back with a platform, a global platform for action. We were supposed, the principle, we were supposed to go back and get into positions of leadership. I remember asking Gertrude Mongera, who led that crusade, to say, but the men are already sitting in the positions, how do we get into those positions? And she laughed and said, push them if you must, but get into leadership. And we came back, organized ourselves, and the continent of Africa has done well, because Africa has had 5 female presidents. Liberia, Central African Republic, Malawi, Mauritius, and now Ethiopia. And Africa, right now, the country that has the largest number of women in parliament, 63% to be exact, is Rwanda on the continent of Africa, globally, the highest. And the African Union, which is our global organization, has achieved parity, 50-50. And one president after another are appointing 50% of their cabinet being women. So we have done well. We have challenges, but we also want to pat ourselves on the back to say we've done well. And we don't want to paint a picture that we have failed, because we know some continents that have had democracy for 200 years that are still trying to get one woman into state house. So we've done well. And as far as democracy is concerned, my view is that Africa has matured. Most countries in Africa. It's not all about conflict. But what I'm seeing is that the next generation, not ours, but the younger ones, are being coming up very clearly and standing up for their rights and making it very clear that they should not sit back and wait for handouts, and they shall not sit back and watch my generation abuse them, use them wrongly. They are calling for accountability and transparency. They are calling for inclusivity. They want to participate in leadership. And I have learned, and I am telling leaders across the world, America included, but Africa most of all, that all those of us who aspire to get into leadership must understand the fact that power has shifted. Power has left state houses. It's in the hands of the people. And if you want to be a leader, you need to understand that. Because when people raise their voices, you need to listen and do something about the situation. Because the younger generation is not about ready to be controlled and to be abused. And if you don't listen, leadership will emerge from the marketplace, from this group and that group, from civil society, and before you know it, they'll bring you down. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to finish by saying that now, post COVID-19, in the midst of all this success that we are talking about, we are now in the midst of COVID-19. And while Africa has registered the lowest numbers of cases as well as deaths comparatively, the effect of the pandemic on poor households and the poor people that were already poor and our fragile health services is immense. And therefore, the post-COVID recovery will have to be global. And all of us need to stand united and to stand together. We are all in this together, and we are all in the global village. And there's so much that we can learn from one another. And I would like to say that what we need, Africa, Europe, poor and rich and poor nations, is mutual respect. COVID-19 has taught us that there's nobody who is better than the other. Everybody was a victim of COVID-19. Whether you are rich, you are educated, you are poor, it was all the same. Therefore, we must be respected as Africa. Anybody can come and work with us in Africa, but realizing that Africans know what to do and where to go. Therefore, when you come, it must be joint programs that are mutual and that we can work together as people, understanding that we are equal before God, and we must all work and insist and try not to leave anybody behind. What has happened, the biggest lesson we have learned is that the digital revolution, where the developed nations are ahead of us, the effect has been adverse for us because our children have failed to access online education. So for 4 months, they've been sitting back. This is one major lesson that I feel that going forward, we should work together and we must try our level best not to leave anybody behind.
Thank
And
you.
the key for me is that women should participate in this leadership, in the leadership positions. And finally, I want everybody to remember that as somebody who has been a leader, leadership is a love affair. You need to fall in love with the people you lead yourself, and the people must fall in love with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you so much. Pastor Barry, I know a lot of your focus is on men. I see Her Excellency focuses on women. Please give us your some time hearing from you on your work.
Okay, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here with you all. How do you follow Her Excellency? And I listened intently as she spoke, and she's right when she said the power is with the people. One of the things that everybody should know is I never planned on being a minister. That was not part of what I planned on doing. As a matter of fact, by the time I got to Church of the Messiah, I didn't even go to church for 2 years because I was so tired of organized religion. And I was just so tired of some of the things that was going on in Detroit, because we have a lot of troubles and a lot of problems, but we have a lot of great people. And in Detroit, we have 4,000 churches. And I was thinking, man, we got a ton of churches. In Detroit, it seemed like things here would be a whole lot different. And with 4,000 churches, I thought we should be the holiest city in the world because we had so many different churches and denominations. So by the time I came to Church of the Messiah, I was only going there because my mother was speaking. So I just went to go hear her, went to the service. The service was okay, didn't particularly care for it, swore I would never go back again. And a few months later, my sister called me and she said, we need some people to help the young people in reading. So we need to be able to get some tutors for the elementary school kids. And then I agreed to do that. I said, do you have to be a member to do that? She said, no, you just got to be willing and be willing to work with the kids. And I did that. And then I got to know the people who were in the church. And I was attracted to the strong mission of community that the church have. Now, it's an Episcopal church. I had never been to an Episcopal church, thought it was a little bit dry, but I did like the fact that the people were committed to mission. So I started coming to the church on a regular basis because the then pastor of Church of the Messiah said, oh, we'll see you on Sunday. And I'm thinking, I don't like church. I don't want to come on Sunday. And he kept telling me to come on Sunday. So I felt like I was kind of voluntold. So I would go on Sunday, stop, listen to the service. Eventually I got it. Never thinking that one day I would actually be the priest and pastor of the church. Lo and behold, I had a burning bush experience with God, who called me to be a priest and a pastor of this church. And it was an incredible experience. So all of the accolades and stuff that people give to me, it really is a movement of God. So I don't apologize for being a preacher, don't apologize for what it is I believe, but there is a movement of God with what's happening at Church of the Messiah. So, but when I became a priest, we only had 40 people. The building was in disrepair and we were drowning in debt. And God gave me a plan, and I did what the plan was. And within 3 years, we went from the 40 people. We currently have over 300 people. The building that was way too big, because this is a giant building. The building is too small and we are debt free. It sounds simple the way that I say it, but I caught hell doing it. Literally, it was very hard to do because people don't like to change the things it is that they do. But God told me, go get the young people. Most young people don't go to church. Our congregation is 60% Black male under the age of 30. So he literally told me to go out, get the Ray Rays, the Pookies, the Shaniquas, the people who don't ordinarily go to church, because he told me they don't reject God. They just reject the package of church. Create a package that they're willing to come to. And so we built the package that the young people were willing to come to. But in order to get their attention, it didn't just take the word of God, it took the works of God. So we literally were already working to rebuild the community and neighborhood. And now we have over 200 units of housing in our community and neighborhood, $48 million invested. We are the employment office in the community and neighborhood. We found out a lot of people couldn't find a job. So we decided to be the employment office. We specialize in getting jobs for people who have been in prison. So we went to the courts in Detroit and told them, don't send the people to prison, send them to church. You send them to us, we'll be able to work with them and their issues and be able to help find them get a job. We did that. We also found that we needed to create our own businesses. We live in a community to whereas there weren't a lot of opportunities, so we had to create the opportunities. So we created a tea beverage company. It's called Nikki's Ginger Tea. It's in 94 stores across the state in the state of Michigan. It's in all the Whole Foods. It's in the gas stations. It's in supermarkets. It's found almost anywhere in Detroit, and it's made in our commercial kitchen. We have a video production company. We have a candle company, which is also made here. We have a bow tie company. We also have a clothing line that's called Kill the Hate. And Everard, our global strategist, was instrumental in that, helped a young man open his own store in downtown Detroit. That wound up being a major feat. He helped him be able to get into a place he ordinarily could not afford. We're also the internet provider. The city of Detroit, in the city of Detroit, 40% of the community don't have the internet. We became the internet provider for our community. So you got Comcast, AT&T, and Church of the Messiah. And we took the Ray Rays and the Pookies, and we taught them how to be able to install the internet. They went to school for 20 weeks. We got them jobs installing the internet in the community and neighborhood. And lo and behold, they're making an upwards of $20 an hour installing the internet. We also have a computer lab. We have 409 kids in college. That's through our marching band. Our marching band is a front for literacy. So we use music in order to get the kids' attention through the marching band. But all of the leaders of the band are college professors. So they work with the kids on music first, and then they get off into literacy and then help them be able to get into school. So we created a nice little empire around the neighborhood of Church of the Messiah, and it caught the attention of a lot of people from all over. So we also came up with something that's called the Master's Plan. So preachers from all over Detroit was like, how is this preacher over here doing this? And I kept thinking, if it's 4,000 churches in Detroit, we should be able to do anything. So collectively, let's work together. And by this being a Christian church, we believe that a virgin had a baby. The foundation of our belief is a virgin had a baby. And I'm thinking we already believe in the impossible anyway. So if a virgin could have a baby, we can build our houses, we can employ the people, we can build and create our own jobs, we can provide the internet, we can put our kids through college. We believe in the impossible anyway. So let's make that impossible tangible. So some ministers came to me and said, look, you need to teach the other preachers this. And I'm like, I don't like preachers. I have a hard time getting together with preachers and we actually get something accomplished. We do a lot of talking and a lot of preaching, but when it comes down to getting our hands dirty, that's a whole nother thing. So I told them, go get the preachers and I'll talk to them. We started off with 8 preachers in May of 2019, coming together to build the kingdom of God on earth. And by the time COVID hit, we were up to 103 churches in Detroit. But the message spread throughout Detroit because our news media came and spread our story. They told our story and it went viral. It went all across the globe. So we had preachers from all over saying, hey, can we start working together? Can we duplicate your plan? And so we came up with the Master's Plan, Master being God. The plan is to build the kingdom of God on earth by the people of God. One day when Everard, our global strategist, called me and said, Pastor Barry, what you working on? And I said, I'm working on this crazy thing called the Master's Plan. Well, we're going to build the kingdom of God on earth. We go work in the poor neighborhoods, and we're going to work with the people in the community and neighborhood, and we go rebuild the neighborhood according to the work Church of the Messiah have already been doing. We're going to do it in other communities. He said, I'm in. I said, Everard, this is a crazy plan. He said, I'm in. So he jumped on board, and I mean, we hit the ground running, and it has been amazing. So because of this, we now have chapters that's not only in Detroit, but in Michigan. We're in Flint, we're in Battle Creek, Highland Park, And then we're in Los Angeles, in San Francisco, in California, in Ohio. We're in Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Toledo. And we now have a chapter in Latvia, in Europe, and in Uganda and Africa, where we're now going to be helping the farmers with growing coffee over in Uganda. So we're going to create a system to whereas they grow their coffee in Uganda, we're going to ship it to the United States, to Detroit, and everywhere we sell the tea, we're going to sell the coffee. So we've been working, putting this plan into action to be able to build out our community and neighborhood. And it's from grassroots. So it's not big developers coming in deciding what's going to happen in the community and neighborhood. It's the people in the neighborhood deciding what's going to happen in the community and neighborhood. We don't mind working with developers, but the developers have got to listen to the people in the community and neighborhood. And that's how we're building out the master's plan. So I want to thank Everard in particular for saying, Pastor Barry, this is a global strategy. Let's work on this and let's bring this to Detroit. Let's start in Island View. And then what Church of the Messiah is an area called Island View. And let's expand out from there. So we've caught the attention of the officials in the city of Detroit. We've caught the attention of our senators and our lawmakers. But more importantly, the people in the community and neighborhood are sitting up saying, wait a minute, I have a say. Wait a minute, I can start a business. I can go to college. I can get back in school. I can get a job. The internet is provided for me. I want to be a part of now this global strategy of standing up in the community and neighborhood where I am to be able to say that I have a voice. It starts with the people. And as Her Excellency said, it's got to start with the people. So we're starting with the people in Detroit to be able to move this forward. So it is a global strategy. So anybody want to work with us, get in contact with me. But I always say, eat your Wheaties, take your vitamins, put on your roller skates, because we're on the move. This is a movement that's happening globally. Let's go.
Marcelo, you deal with how the things here on community, countries, and also the globe and the planet and the universe. Please take us through your journey, please. But remember to start in the younger years.
Wow, that's so unfair. Here I am, after these two amazing doers. I mean, it is clear that from the two speeches that I'm amazingly inspired by them, actually, that it's not just about having a dream. Anyone can dream, but it's about implementing your dream to make it true as you work with other people. And that's exactly what our previous speakers have done. And my only claim to fame here, in a very humble way, is that I am an educator. So I guess the way that I connect with people is through what I have to teach them, and the way that I inspire them is through knowledge, and to empower them through understanding that the more they know, the more independent they become, and the more potential for achievement they have. Now, my journey, as Everard had asked, I grew up in Rio de Janeiro. I'm from Brazil, and I was basically, for the first 18 years of my life, I lived about a block from the famous Copacabana beach, which has this interesting paradox about it, because it is a spectacular beach with the open Atlantic Ocean in front of you, but is also this massive concrete jungle behind the beach where over 200,000 people live in apartment buildings. And you could see that the price that the city has paid in order to grow and to accommodate more people is to squeeze away nature. And even when I was young, that caused a very deep impression on me, that is that the only way that humanity can advance? Is this the only way that we can actually make progress, which is in a sense by pushing nature away and by isolating ourselves in these big concrete jungles, which are essentially the anti-forest, right? And so when you go to Rio, you see this precisely. You see that you have the big city between the ocean and the hills, and where there is still some Atlantic forest growing, but the city itself is kind of like stuck because it cannot move beyond these two walls, the ocean on one side and the hills on the other. Of course, through human ingenuity, a mountain is never a block. And so we go through tunnels, we go through roads, and of course we go over the mountains and across the mountains, and the jungle grows more and more. And as I was growing up, I was seeing this incredible growth of this city and the unfortunate heavy price that the environment had to pay for this growth. So much so that when they enlarged Copacabana Beach, because they needed to make it into a 4-way street as opposed to a 2-way street, they had to drag sand into the beach in order to literally control the ocean and make it basically retreat. And a lot of that sand that was dragged into Copacabana Beach was very polluted from another area of Rio. And of course, as an 11-year-old, I'm invincible. I go swim at the beach and I get hepatitis A because of that. And so I understood quite there that sometimes the price that we humans pay in order to grow is to not just attack nature, but to be sick through our own greed, in order to advance blindly where we want to go. And my attachment to nature grew into an attachment to science and to a certain way to a connection with spirituality through the natural world. I wanted to understand the mysteries of existence. I wanted to understand things that we still didn't know about the universe, that we didn't know about matter, that we didn't know about ourselves. And as a teenager, I realized that asking questions in science, especially fundamental questions in science about origins of the universe, origins of life, origins of mind, that seemed to be so detached from everybody's reality, actually have a lot to do with our reality, and that science is precisely the bridge that connects these questions to our lives of every day. And so, I kept going on my path, and I educated myself in Brazil, but I left to England to do a PhD, and then I came to the United States, and I dedicated the first years of my life to kind of surviving in a very competitive academic environment. And the thing is that the more I learned about the universe, the more I learned about planet Earth within a more cosmic context, the more I realized how important our planet is, how rare our planet is, and how essential it is for us to develop a different paradigm if we are to survive in this planet as a species. And that, to me, has been one of the biggest lessons that science has told me, that you have to look at the universe with different eyes than we have been looking. We have to understand that we are complete and absolutely part of the universe, that we are actually part of the history of the universe, but with a tremendous and very rare ability of being these molecular machines that are capable of self-awareness, right? Because we are the animals that can actually think about who we are, that can build programs to develop villages in Malawi, that we can build programs to develop the potentiality of people to employ themselves, to educate themselves in Detroit, that we can build radio telescopes to find out about the origins of galaxies far, far away from us. All of this should be something that every child in the world should understand. And so for the last few years, what I have done is I have dedicated a lot of my time, which in the past was a lot for research, to kind of spread the knowledge of what we have learned about the world to as many people as I can. And because I came from Brazil, I have a tremendous debt of gratitude to Brazil for everything that I've learned there. And so I have focused a lot of this work there because I know that that is a country that has huge potential, that has wonderful people that are very thirsty for this kind of knowledge. And with the pandemic, there are many lessons that we have learned. But one of the fundamental lessons is that science is not a privilege. Science is a necessity, and it's a necessity for every country in the world. And for this to be true, we need to invest in education with everything that we have. And this education is not just restricted to the schools. This is an education that can be part of our communities, that can be part of our families, that families can talk about questions related to science and the choices that we have to make in order to make sure that we have a world that is equitable and just, that we don't have the digital divide, for example, that Her Excellency Joyce Banda mentioned, that the kids in Malawi, because they didn't have internet access, they could not keep on going with their online teaching. This has been a problem in Brazil as well, which has managed to paralyze classes for over 200 days for similar reasons. And so clearly, if in the past the power resided in land ownership and then is shifted to machine ownership, now the power resides in information ownership. And those who have access to this information definitely have a huge advantage over others. Just like if you're talking about the economics of the Industrial Revolution, those who had access to the means of production had a major advantage over others. So it's always about those who have and who have not. And now the question is, who has access to information and who doesn't? And that has to end. And the beauty of the time that we live in, where we have the internet, is that we can democratize knowledge. We can break the bridges, the social divides that we have, the tribal divides that we have, to spread and construct a society that has access to knowledge. And then each individual, each citizen can make the choices that he or she will make in order to improve their communities, improve their countries, and looking always at this global way of thinking. Because if the pandemic has taught us something, is that we humans, we have this arrogance to think that we are above nature, but we are absolutely never above nature. We are part of nature. We are fragile as a species. We are just a species trying to survive in an environment that is competitive, and the virus doesn't really care where you come from, how much money you have, in what kind of God you believe. The environment only sees us as a human host. So the virus is basically telling us that we are one, that there is unity in our species, that there is no essential racial divide in the world, that this is really a social construct. What we have is ancestry, we have ethnicities, and we have to move away from the tribal divide that has been the defining characteristic of our species through the past thousands of years, into a more inclusive one tribe only, where differences are respected, and we as humans adopt and really implement the moral ethical code in order to make this place a better place, the earth a better planet, respecting all forms of life, human and otherwise. So this information comes from philosophy, comes from social political discussions, but it also comes from astronomy, from looking at Earth from out there into here, this pale blue dot, this planet which is so fragile in a very austere cosmos, but that has nevertheless allowed life to exist for at least 3.5 billion years, so that we humans could be here today talking about these essential questions. So if we're going to discuss social future, the future of society, we have to talk about social justice, equality, and access to education and to information. And nowadays that access is through the internet. So the same way that in the 20th century, the world was electrified, now we need to spread the internet across the world, so we're truly able to become a global village where everyone has a chance to have access to information, to grow as an individual, and to promote change at a local and global scale. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Yeah, Your Excellency is giving you a round of applause. It's so powerful to be in the conversation between the three of you. Before I start asking any questions, first I'd like to say to the audience, if you have questions, please feel free to type them in, and we would try to get to your questions before the end of it. But I was wondering if the three of you had any questions for each other.
Yes, I have a question for Her Excellency. And I would like her, if she could, to speak a little more about how a very previously male-dominated society saw your ascendancy to power. That we talked a little bit about this before, but you talked a lot about the corruption, this justice system in your country, because I think that's very pertinent for many countries in the world right now.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, as I've said earlier, that I've championed the 4 areas in my life: education, income, maternal health, leadership, and human rights. I started this work with nothing as a volunteer, just determined to say, if I walked out of an abusive marriage myself and economically empowered myself, started my businesses, and got to a place where no money could abuse me, I decided to reach out and so I started an organization called the National Association of Business Women in 1990, and it targeted rural women. And because I had worked with women at grassroots for 10 years, village to village, finding that their brothers had gone to school and were working, discrimination at household level, when the resources were low, the women didn't go. So they were there sitting in the village. And that was my target group. And because I earned their love and respect, that's why I said leadership is a love affair. You must fall in love with the people you serve, and the people must fall in love with you. They saw me for 20 years, almost 20 years, working with them, but at no profit to me, no job, no reward. But I had already empowered myself economically. I was a businesswoman already. So having earned their respect, I have found that they were ready for my leadership. And that, for me, was both men and women. So in 1997, I won the Africa Prize for Leadership for the sustainable end of hunger. And the prize money was $50,000. The prize money was 100,000, but because we shared the award with the president of Mozambique, I was not any president myself. I was just an activist working with rural women. But I took my 50,000 that was announced as my prize money, started an organization to provide education for the girl child. As far as Malawians were concerned, I was the person who should be a leader. So I think the difference between me and some of my colleagues, where they find challenges and resistance for them to participate in leadership, I had the advantage that people were already knew who I was and what I had done. In fact, in 2012, when the president died, we had been elected together, me as his vice president. And the constitution was very clear that if he passes on, I shall take over. There was so much resistance from the men that were in government then that there was no way a woman was going to become president. It was the people that marched from the rural areas from across the country to parliament buildings and sat there and insisted that they were not going to leave until Joyce Banda takes over. That is number one. Number two, if you go into history, you will find that African women were leaders even before colonization. In fact, it is colonization that slowed them down. So I've done a lot of research on this. You find that even in Ghana, the woman who was a leader was the one that was resisting colonization, and she had to leave Ghana and live in exile until her death when men were giving in. Here in Malawi, there was a woman that went to war, frontline, to refuse Portuguese to demarcate her land, and she was assassinated there. So African women were leaders even before colonization. It is therefore not very difficult for men to understand that we can also sit at the table. So sometimes patriarchy, they try to close the door, but we also have learned on how to work with our men. We don't confront them. We don't antagonize them. We work with them. We engage them. We understand our greatest gift as African women is our negotiating skills. So it wasn't hard for me. The problem is when as we agreed in Beijing to come back and occupy positions of leadership, what we didn't discuss is once we get into leadership, how do we stay there? Because we have found that all of us will get there, then men will gang up against us, and then we leave. We can't stand the pressure, the competition, and the fight, and the abuse, and the smear campaigns. So you find that out of the 5 women that became leaders in Africa, only 1 is in office. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible. Pastor Barry, do you have any questions for anyone, or Your Excellency?
Yeah, but I'm just amazed by what these 2 gentlemen have their presentations. I mean, I had no clue that Brother Barry, that's what he did. I mean, honestly, and I think what I can openly say that after COVID, I must travel to the US and see what both of you are doing in your place.
Wow.
And I'm just so encouraged. I listen to Brother Barry, and it makes me feel so small, as if there's nothing I have done. And I was saying yesterday, I was talking here in Malawi. I said we've looked upon the United States of America for leadership in environment, but I mean, suddenly we saw that the leadership of America was abdicating this position. And I kept saying in my speeches, I hope Americans don't step aside, because others will take that leadership and they'll never be able to step in again. I was listening to, is it Marcelo? Yes, and I've been looking at Brazil and sometimes shedding tears when I see those forests burn. But I think to have champions like yourself, who is committed, what we need to do is to have many people like yourself, the younger generation in Brazil, the younger generation in Malawi, in America, just for the protection of our environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing what I have heard tonight. And I'm glad I didn't listen to these speeches before. I didn't hear his speech. I would have chickened out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow.
I'm so grateful that I was included in this conversation.
Yeah, we are grateful to have you here as well. I think Marcelo, when he first opened, said that he feel like the aspect of action, you guys are actionable steps, and he is just a professor. But this is far from the truth. Marcelo, you have kind of embodied that challenging the world of science, embodying the world of science from a respectful way as a scientist, but also challenging the fact that, even with your books, The Island of Knowledge, where you say that the more we learn, there's the more that the water on the island grows and the water goes away. It's the more that we do not know. And I think with this, to what Her Excellency, you are saying, this aspect of understanding that we are in a constant state of learning from each other and growing so that we can create a better world. I think, Marcelo, you kind of, as a leader in the world of science, I think this is necessary. So I'd like to ask a question. In each of your respective fields, I see that the world is being challenged in that way. Like Marcelo, and I'd like for you to go first, because we see a lot of recent attacks on science, like this aspect of can we prove that we do have a global environmental problem? People, even with the pandemic, people are thinking to themselves, "Hey, I don't have to wear a mask. The virus is not real." Do you feel that science is under attack, and what can you say about that?
Yes, thanks for the question. So I do think that science is under attack, and it's under attack because it serves the interests of certain political groups, of certain economic groups, that they tend to challenge the authority of scientific experts because they do not want to accept those opinions, because they are against what they actually want to do. And so, unfortunately, this sort of fake news environment where we live in, and social media tends to amplify that because social media works through repetition. Essentially, the more you repeat something, the more viral, as we say, it becomes. And so repetition of a falsehood becomes amplified as much as the repetition of a true fact. And so you have this conflagration between knowledge and anti-knowledge, the will to actually learn and the will to actually not learn, but to follow. And this is exactly what's going on. And to governments that tend to be very dictatorial governments, very right-wing governments, this is a very old strategy. We saw it in the dictatorships of the 20th century, where we undermine the authority of any group that can threaten our power, so that we can then become the power that brings knowledge to the people, so that we are going to take care of the people. And so the more disinformation you spread, the more you weaken the resolve of people to learn, because the more confused they become. And then the so-called protector comes in and manipulates people in their opinions. And this is exactly what goes on here. You should not politicize a pandemic. You should not politicize the use of a mask. You should not politicize the fact that the climate is obviously changing. We are seeing 2020 has been a horrific year across the world because of this. And still, the eyes are not open, you know? And so what can we do? We can teach, we can educate, we can open more and more conversations, not always preaching to the choir. And here I connect with Pastor Barry's story, because he didn't. He brought people into his church, and he did that through serious work. And that is exactly what scientists need to do more. They need to engage more with the general public. They need to engage more with the young generations, just as Her Excellency just mentioned, because it's going to the schools, it's talking to the children that is really going to make a difference. And I have tremendous hope in the younger generation. I have young kids myself, and I look at them and the way they think about each other, the way they think about inclusivity, the way they disregard all the different tribes that our generation constructed across the world, and talk about a more fluid gender issue, a more fluid racial issue. And I love that. And I hope that this is the knowledge that is going to become more and more popular. You know, Her Excellency mentioned that the power has shifted. I agree. The power is definitely shifting, and it's going to shift because this new generation is going to make it shift, because they will understand better than we did that they can become the actors for change.
The idea of these challenges, right? Like each of you have accomplished so much, and could you tell us about, and I'd like to start with you, Pastor Barry, because you must have faced tremendous challenges, because you've brought so many people together. Like, you have people from Europe wanting to be a part of your plan now, from San Francisco, across the US, even in Island View, your congregation is also a diverse congregation, but you allow the people who are in most challenging positions you almost push them into a leadership role. Could each of you tell us about like one of your most challenging moments and how you pushed through that moment to continue doing what you're doing?
Wow. So I think the most challenging moment is to deal with the truth of the matter. You know, as Dr. Gleiser was talking, as Professor Gleiser was talking, I was thinking about dealing in truth. And a lot of times science and religion a lot of times are at odds, but there are some things that's just outright true that we have to deal with. Like when you talk about things like pandemic, I always have to tell people in the United States when they say it's my constitutional right not to wear a mask, And I always tell them, but the virus has never read the Constitution. It don't know that. So it's just going to attack whoever. And then the pandemic itself literally brought up America's pre-existing conditions of inequity and racism. And so in dealing with that, it brought it to the forefront. And sometimes we always look to the government or leaders in certain areas to be able to work on that. But sometimes we forget the people who are in the community have a lot of rights, and they have a lot of power, more than they know. And one of the things that we've dealt with in Island View with Church of the Messiah is there was a lack of opportunity. And because the opportunities were not coming to the community and neighborhood from other sources, then we had to create it ourselves. We had to start practicing what we were preaching by being able to say, we are believers and we believe in God and we believe in racial harmony and we believe in doing the right thing. So we had to do that. And we had to recognize nobody was coming to save us. So then therefore we had to put our faith where our mouth was. And we had to get together and learn that the true people that we know that we can count on is the people who are in this community and neighborhood. So therefore, we're going to do it. Now, nobody's perfect and everybody don't have all the answers. But at the same time, we do have some things to start with. We do have people with expertise and talent, and we have to work on that. And our job is to give our young people hope so that they can stop and say, I played a role in changing my community, my neighborhood. And we're not looking for a big government. We're not looking for a big business. We're not looking for law enforcement. No, we're looking to each other. We can build this. We can do this because we're standing on something that we have that can't be taken away from us. And that is faith. And faith is a powerful force. And we even know this, Marcelo, I'm quite sure that you can say, even when it comes down to faith, even from a scientific point of view, if people believe something strong enough, regardless of the obstacles or circumstances, they'll be able to pull it off if they believe it strong enough. But one of the ways that we actually help people get to where it is they need to go, we had to make faith tangible. You can see the housing. You can drink the tea. You can wear the clothes. You can use the internet. You can go to our doctor's office. You can go to our legal services. You can plug your phone into one of our power stations throughout the community and neighborhood. Yes, we can make faith tangible, something you can see, touch, and feel, and we can work together to be able to change our community and neighborhood without looking for somebody else to rescue us. We can do it ourselves, and that's what it is we're doing in Island View.
Incredible. I think pretty soon we would open up some of the questions to the audience. If you guys have questions, please send them in. Your Excellency, do you have anything to say on that question?
I have found that we live in a country in Malawi where 85% of the people are rural-based.
Mm-hmm.
They are rural-based and living in abject poverty. But being poor is not being stupid. That's what I have learned. That the poor people know exactly what they want to achieve if only they can be given an opportunity. And I have found, as I've always told them, I'm not going to do it for you. I'm just going to help you help yourself. And I have found that when you make them own a project, just like Brother Barry is saying, when they know and they see the possibilities, they go out of their way and help themselves. And you will get there and just facilitate. One project that I decided to support people with is if you come into Malawi and you go into the remote areas, you will be shocked by the type of housing they live in. So I decided that I was going to test that. So if you come to Malawi now and you go across the country, you'll find that in every of the 29 districts of the country, there's a village that was initiated by Joyce Banda. So what we do is to go in the village and encourage the people and ask them if that's what they want to do. So all you do is you use their labor, they provide free labor, they carry water, they carry sand, and they even mold bricks, and you bring in cement and the roofing. and you bring builders from the area, the same area, so that when you pay them, the money goes into the community. I have seen transformation like I've never seen before. Because when people stand up and decide, I'm going to change my situation, they work towards that goal. And even the reducing of maternal mortality by 32% in 2 years, it was about the local chiefs, the local leadership. And they were men. For the first time, people in the village saw that a man, a chief, can talk about maternal health, that a man can go with his wife to the maternity clinic. And we found that a man then would buy a bicycle and be ready to carry his wife to the maternity hospital when labor is due. So you find that with the engagement of rural community, the people that are affected, and they allow them to own the project, the success is unbelievable. And it is now having post leadership now. That is the project that I'm going to be implementing now. Establishing rural growth centers and assisting women to establish, communities to establish what we are calling smart villages. And one feature that is going to be there, the first feature in that smart village will be environment, alternative energy, clean energy, and restoring our destroyed environment by planting trees.
Amazing, incredible. So one of the questions from someone is that for Pastor Barry, how could the master plan be applied to communities around the globe? With the same type of effort, how do you inspire the people in your communities to take that kind of effort on?
So a couple things. Primarily, I just want to say that intentionally, a lot of times we decide to work with religious organizations because you should not have to tell them what the right thing to do is. We all agree that it is right to look after people, to bring people out of poverty, to make sure that people eat, to make sure that they have shelter and clothing, make sure they have an opportunity to be able to take care of themselves, and make sure that they have opportunities to change their lives. So on purpose, we try to work through our religious organizations to kind of hold them accountable to say, this is what we're all agreeing on. So we're going to help this happen in a community and neighborhood. But it's working with the people who are there. The people who are there know what they need the most. They know what opportunities may be lacking, but they may also know where the riches are. Because sometimes people in the community and neighborhood, all they need is somebody to bring opportunity. Like, for instance, I didn't go out and get the people in the community and neighborhood. They were already there. The only thing was the church became the business incubator and said, if you have an idea, come to the church. The church became the place to be able to say, hey, we're putting our kids through college. You can come here. The church just became the epicenter through which you can do these thoughts and ideas. So it would be when you go to a community and neighborhood, you stop and you find out what's there. What are the resources that's there? What are the needs of the people? And being able to help bring the needs of the people to that community and neighborhood and respect them as the people who know what they need the most and hear what it is that they say, not come in from a top-down approach, but literally come in and say, we're here to listen. We want to be of service. We want to be able to help. And that's what the Master's Plan does. We just went up to Flint in Michigan, and we met with 23 of the churches in Flint with the people that were there, and we looked at the daycare center that they opened. We looked at a school that they're looking to acquire and buy to turn into workforce development. We looked at the land that they purchased, which was something like 7 acres of land. We looked at the neighborhood that they wanted to reinvent, but we looked at the work that they already did and the work that they were working on collectively together as 23 religious organizations coming together to work as one, because there was power in number and they were doing it together.
Amazing. Marcelo, a question for you is in science, like nature is proven to be competitive. How do we as human beings, because nature is competitive, does it innately mean that we as human beings are competitive? Is that why we have the problems we have?
Well, I think we have to separate competition from evil competition. I think that competition can be very useful and it is part of who we are. And yes, nature is competitive. The whole idea of life as a struggle in an aggressive environment is part of the natural selection process, right? The virus is showing us this. It does not care that the humans are dying, and lots of them, in fact. But that is how nature operates. But competition can be a positive part of a personality as long as it is constructive competition as opposed to destructive competition. So we all gain from having the spirit of achievement, for trying to improve ourselves, for competing with our own barriers and our own boundaries. So I think the first and healthiest competition we can have is within ourselves. As me as a human being, how can I grow? How can I become better? How can I improve my reach? How can I make a difference in my community, in my country, in the world, by getting out of my shell, so to speak? And so that is a very important thing. The bad part of competition comes when you, as Pastor Barry just mentioned, when you think that you can come from the top and tell people what to do because you may have more information or you may have more means. And so it is clear that the most effective way of working with different communities is to come in humbly, to come in with a humble approach where you're not just tolerate and listen to the other, but you're actually interested in growing and learning from what the other person has to say. And that takes humility. And that is what is so hard in an environment that is competitive in the destructive way to understand. But we all have to compete to create a better world, compete to become better humans, to become better partners, better neighbors, better leaders. And so I think that is how the context of competition should be understood. Not that competition is bad, but competition can be a force for good as long as it has the correct goal and mission to do so.
And one of the other questions in terms of science, someone's asking that on the planet there's talk of space, and that there's not enough space for everyone. How could you talk to us about that in terms of in science and space for human beings to live?
Yeah, so this is an important question because there is definitely space and there is definitely enough food to feed people. What's wrong is the way we think about space and about food resources. So, for example, meat and poultry industry, they tend to be profoundly destructive of the environment, but they are needed in certain places, but they are not needed in the excessive ways in which they are usually consumed across the world. And so if we change our mindset towards how we eat and what we eat, we can profoundly change the way we go after the environment to create more planting areas, more grazing areas, all of this to serve the needs of our meat-eating, industries and appetites, so to speak. So it really depends not so much on us being too big, which is true. Almost 8 billion humans is a lot of people, but it's really about how the resources of the planet are being used, how they're being abused, how greed and social injustice is collecting so much of the food and the energy in the hands of so few. And so I think it's more about equitability than anything else. That's really where the fight is. That's really where the creative competition is, to change the mindset of humans so that we learn to share as a human hive, just like the bees have this collective intelligence to work together in order to improve the common good. We have to get into that mindset because that is the only way that we're going to thrive in the next few decades.
Incredible. And we have probably 8 more minutes. So I wanted to ask all of you, and each of you can go maybe for 2 minutes or so, what have you learned from each other, and what advice could you give to all the viewers here on what could we do as a collective species to kind of impact the world in our individual ways? Her Excellency, you can go first. What have you learned from this conversation today from each other, and what could we do?
Well, this just confirmed to me that power has shifted and it's with the people. I listened to Brother Barry and what the community has been able to do, how they have empowered themselves. He didn't go out doing it for them. He just provided a platform for them to get together, to mobilize themselves and to do it. There's so much power in the world. And what we are learning now, increasingly all the time, is that the people are not just sitting back and waiting for handouts. They know exactly how to change their desperate situation if only they can be given the opportunity. And as Brother Barry said, it's about bottom-up approach. If people feel respected and if people feel they own the program, they will get out and work and change their situation. I have learned from Professor that we need to wake up. And he reminded me of what we have seen this past year, how a young girl from Sweden woke up the whole world and marched and demonstrated and told us off about how we were going to live a world that is not good enough for their age group. What I am listening carefully, what I feel I have learned is that there's my age group that have destroyed the environment. And then there's now a certain group that are playing in our hands with politics and are destroying and burning the forests and destroying whatever we have remaining on the ground and affecting the climate. And then we have a younger generation that are fighters, that are concerned, that are not going to allow us to continue to destroy the environment. And I think it's time to wake up. But the younger generation gives me hope. And the science have to be in the forefront, at the center of whatever we are going to do. We cannot ignore it.
Thank you, Excellency. Pastor Barry?
I would say that I've learned from this is in whatever profession you in, you can shine. We all come together different ways, but for the exact same goal. The thing that I would like to just tell everybody is to get up off your asset. We all have assets. We have assets in our communities. We have assets in our families. God created us for greatness and for power. And a lot of times we get bogged down by the circumstances and the situation of our lives and the way that the world look. But if we would stop and concentrate on collectively the power that we have, it's just like to be here among this group is amazing to me. It's almost like I have so much respect for them, but in whatever category we work in, we're making the difference where we are. And if we would stop and say, let us make the difference where we are. We all have assets. And if we don't sit on our assets, get up off our assets, make a difference in the world and in the community, we can change the assets of the world. And the greatest assets that we have really is each other. And we can change this collectively. So we need to get up off our asset.
Amazing. Marcelo?
Yes, so I just have to say that I've learned so much from you too, because you really have made a profound difference in your places, where you are in your communities. And this is exactly the best example that we can have, is to showcase the people that actually make a difference like this. And so I'm learning from this that we all have the power to transform the world. Her Excellency mentioned Greta, from Sweden, and her environmental activism, but we all can do this. It's each one of us. The fire has to burn inside each one of us. And if we use our assets, just to borrow from Pastor Barry, we really can illuminate the path ahead. And it takes courage. Sometimes you have to go against the environment around you, but you can make a difference. And we can all do this by inspiring the next person, around us. And if you do that, then that person will inspire 2 more, and then 4 more, and then 8 more. And then before you know it, you have a chain reaction, and the power not just is shifting, but the power does indeed shift, because it is clear that this year is showcasing to us how unsustainable this situation is across the world, and how we as humans have to grow up and really take action to make this world a much better place than it is right now, because it is clear that it's not a very good place for most people. And so those of us that have this fire in the belly have to light the fire on everybody else's belly, so that everyone is working together to make a difference. So this is what I've learned tonight, and this is what I'd like to do as we move on from here.
I have no words. All I can say is thank you. This has been a dream of mine to have all of you speak with each other. I think for me, speaking with you individually, I have learned so much. As a collective, I think the thing that I take away is that this aspect of this multidisciplinary approach, multicultural, the aspect that we are living on a planet, that we are all a part of that organism, and that it is up to each one of us, and we do have the power to kind of reach across from the person next to us, whether they're in our house or now, if we could bridge the internet divide, reach across the planet to kind of impact each other's lives. I just want to say thank you, Marcelo, again. Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Pastor Barry. And thank you, the Institute, for allowing us to be a part of this amazing conversation. And thank you, the audience, for spending the time with us. Marcelo, if you have any final words, please go ahead, or I would say thank you to everyone again.
I'll just have to thank you all for coming. It really is a privilege to learn from you. I hope our paths will cross physically and not just virtually like this one day, and that day not be too far away from now, because I would love to continue this conversation, in presence, and thank you all for listening. And absolutely what Everard said is exactly right. The goal of this institute is to bring together conversations that belong to apparently different areas, but actually have a lot to teach each other. And that is the mission, and that is the goal, and that the world would be a much better place if we could do this, if we could listen to people with different points of view, with different stories, so that we can learn from one another and grow collectively as a result. So thanks for listening, and I hope you join us for other ISA Dartmouth events soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.